Sadam, yogis and yoginis, hello, welcome back to the channel. We're gonna talk today, this is the part 2 of the video on the Kundalini energy, and we're gonna talk more about the practice. Now I want to make a little disclaimer first of all, because some people read Kundalini rising and it's kind of clickbait and they just click on it. Maybe if you're looking for some kind of quick technique and shortcut to get enlightened or to have these Kundalini experiences, this is not what this video is about. So if you have to go, sorry to see you go, but that is not the purpose of this video. We are going to be exploring quite in detail, but methodically and slowly, the meaning of the Kundalini rising, what are the effects, how can it have some dangers, some warnings, some things that we should be careful for. And then we're going to go into the method, slowly, the actual path for the Kundalini to raise. And we're actually going to explore what the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is telling us on this particular path, which is quite explicit in the details. And I think it's good to go to the classics. Sometimes I explore the different classics to see what they talk about. Like I have a video on the Kundalini Yoga Upanishad, which is very revealing on the technique of the Kachari Mudra, which we're going to mention again today. So if you haven't watched part 1 of this video, I recommend that you watch it first. And if you want to know more information on the Kachari Mudra, I recommend to watch that video on Kundalini Yoga Upanishad. Now, why is Kundalini interesting? Apart from it being in fashion, now there's a lot of talk about the Kundalini. The rising of the Kundalini is associated with enlightenment. And so that's interesting, right? And that calls for our attention. But first of all, before we go into anything that is going to be related to the Kundalini, let me remind the warning that it's always given to us in the teachings, which is have a teacher. You need a teacher. We unfortunately need a spiritual teacher here in this planet to help us and guide us along. It would be very nice if we could do everything from books or even from YouTube videos. But my goodness, free me from the responsibility of anyone taking these videos and just, taking things to the extreme or in a way that is imbalanced or in a way that is a misinterpretation of the teachings, and then, having some karmic consequences from that. So first of all, find a teacher, somebody that can guide you, somebody with experience, somebody with some years of practice that can tell you when you are getting imbalanced in the practice. So that's what we recommend. Now, there are basically 2 ways to have a Kundalini rising, and one would be the active way to you work for yourself. One would be the passive way in which somebody from the outside is doing it to you. So let me just mention briefly on the second one, and I would say that just before anything, I am not very keen on those kind of techniques. I think if we have an issue, it's better if we can work it out by ourselves. And if we have something that we can work, with something that we need to develop, why not learn how to do that, right? We can go to a restaurant every day and have somebody cook the food for us, but it's nice if you can learn about diet yourself and you can learn to cook the food for yourself, because you never know in the restaurant what they're going to put in it, and you never really learn what you are eating. And imagine with Kundalini is even more important. So, passive activation of the Kundalini, where you go to somebody and somebody is doing it to you. Now, in some cases, some cases it's not even Kundalini, what they are rising. There's going to be a pranic flow and an pranic rising. There's prana moving through the nadis, and that can be pleasant and can be joyous, but doesn't necessarily have to mean that this is Kundalini Yoga. I'm not saying all of those are Kundalini. I'm not saying Kundalini Yoga, Kundalini rising. It could be that it's Kundalini, but in many cases it's just going to be some prana flowing through the body And that could be you could enjoy it, and there could be some kind of manifestations, kind of joyful manifestations, can be kind of orgasmic in some way, can be kind of addictive in some way as well. If you enjoy it, you want more of that. And if you don't know how to produce it yourself, this is like a drug. You take the drug to get to that state, but you don't know how to get to that state by yourself. So you have to use the drug again and again. Now, there could be a spontaneous manifestation, and sometimes it may just rise, maybe by some practice that you may do, or maybe spontaneously just something happens, and you may feel like, oh my God, this is the Kundalini rising. And again, this may not be the Kundalini. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Kundalini. Just because you feel some heat in the spine, or some trembling, or some shaking, or maybe some spontaneous movement of the arms, something like that, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that that's a Kundalini rising. It could actually be just a pranic imbalance. The body is out of balance, and the prana is flowing through some nadis, and now you're having these spontaneous risings of energy flowing through you. And I may also say, we have to be very careful, because the mind is very powerful, and the mind can make us believe that we are enlightened. The mind can make us believe that we are having a spiritual experience when it's actually creating a fantasy. So again, let us be careful when we are having any sort of experience that this is not a fantasy created by the mind. I can often notice in some classes, some yoga classes, some meditation, and somebody starts to going like that. Generally, when you raise the head like that, you are cutting your mind from the experience in the body, and generally, very often, you're going into a fantasy. And the fantasies can be very joyful, but this is more like a mental masturbation. Let's say it's like a fantasy that is wow, and I'm enjoying it, but it doesn't necessarily mean any sort of spiritual growth. So, sorry to be so negative straight away. Now, it could be that somebody is actually, they have the capacity to tune into your Kundalini and awaken it. And if so, going to one of these places where they do these treatments and they awaken it for you, you should ask yourself, am I ready to receive this energy? Is my body ready to deal with that? Is my mind ready to deal with that and the consequences of raising this energy? And if you haven't gotten there by yourself, if you didn't get by yourself, it is very likely that it didn't happen because you were not ready yet to receive it. Unless this Kundalini awakening by somebody, that somebody is actually your guru, your teacher, your spiritual teacher, that is doing some sort of diksha, some sort of initiation. And in that case, if this is your teacher and you trust in your teacher and you're committed and you have a discipline and you are committed to follow the discipline, if your teacher is giving you that kind of experience, then we have to trust that that's exactly what you needed at that time and that you were ready to receive it. So again, we come back to the point of needing a teacher. Now, apart from your teacher having this relationship to them, and hopefully they know what they are doing, because there's many people who claim to be enlightened or claim to know some things that they don't necessarily know it. And not that I am claiming anything myself here right now. I'm not claiming any kind of mastery or any kind of knowing the truth and the only truth, and therefore please listen to me. Not at all. I'm just saying exert some caution and be mindful of your choice, let's say. Now, having said all that, I say, well, don't be just passive, be active. Get yourself involved into having your own Kundalini awakened. And now, why should we want to awaken the Kundalini? Well, first of all, it's our own right. It's our own birthright. Just because we are born in this spiritual body, this physical body, this body has this energy, this huge potential that it can awaken, is waiting, in the base of the spine, and it wants to wake up. But it wants to wake up when we are ready to do it. So yes, it can be blissful, it can be wonderful, and it can be our own enlightenment. So if we get ready for that, it's going to want to do that. So Kundalini, by the way, it's asleep, but it's not always like dead. It's not dead, right? A little bit of Kundalini is always flowing. Otherwise, we would not be alive. We would already be dead. And just, me moving, me speaking right now, that means there's some Kundalini flowing through me. But we don't know what it is. The full power of it. A metaphor that is often used. Imagine that you are going with your car and you are in the highway and you realize you were driving with the handbrake on and you were in the first gear. So imagine how the car was going like that, right? Now the car has the potency and the power to go much faster and is much more efficient than stopping itself through the handbrake. So Kundalini awakening is kind of like releasing the handbrake and suddenly realizing that, oh my God, my handbrake was on. You take it off and then the car is like, whoa, now it's moving. And not only is it moving, but now I have more than one gear. I have 2 gears, 3 gears, 4 or 5. Actually, we have 7, right? The 7 main chakras. So Kundalini rising and rising through the chakras is equivalent to realizing that this body has these other gears that we can engage, and then this break that we are breaking, we are stopping ourselves from getting them. So learning some Kundalini yoga, and that can be a very wide term, Kundalini yoga, any kind of yoga that awakens the Kundalini could be Kundalini yoga. But learning Kundalini yoga can help you to release the handbrake and to awaken, so changing the gears. Which, by the way, following the metaphor a little bit more, if you have a wonderful car, I don't know what would it be, I don't know to say any name, like let's say a Ferrari, right? You have a Ferrari car, like a Formula One super sport, really, really good car. Now, are you going to give it like the best fuel that it can have so that it can be, really powerful? And can you clean it? Are you going to clean it and maintain it? Or are you just bring it to any kind of fast food and clean it very seldomly and not bringing it to a mechanic and not doing any checkups, not aligning the wheels and whatever has to be aligned and checking the pressure? And of course, if you have this Formula One sports racing car, you're going to take care of it. Well, think of the body like that. Just the fact that we have the Kundalini inside of us, this is a racing car. This is the most efficient machine possibly in the universe, right? And what kind of food are we giving it? What kind of maintenance are we doing? Are we calibrating it? Are we doing some posture, some stretching, some yoga that is helping the body to be always in balance? So this comes into question. If we have this incredible machine, why don't we take care of it, first of all? So if the Kundalini wants to wake up and it's just waiting for us to get ready, well, then let's get ready, right? All right, so what does get ready mean? Get ready partly will have to be, the body has to be healthy enough. This is one of the reasons why we cannot meditate. If we are feeling pain or we are sick, it's going to be difficult to meditate. So it's good if we can get in as healthy as a state as possible, as flexible the body as we can. We don't require to put the leg behind the head, but we need a certain level of healthiness and and flexibility and purity in our diet so that there is energy flowing through the channels. Now, our nervous system has to be strong. The nervous system is the equivalent to a light bulb, the filament of the light bulb. And the filament of the light bulb is going to determine whether that light bulb is going to be at 10 watts or is going to be at 200 watts. And trying to raise the Kundalini before the filament is strong enough, this could be like taking the light bulb and putting it to, these cables that are with the high electric current in the street, going from one town to another to deliver electricity to a city. Imagine taking a light bulb from home and putting it there. It's going to explode, right? So that's why sometimes he said that Kundalini is dangerous, because we have to be ready for that. And I think there is some wisdom in those words, and we will talk about this a little bit more. So a strong nervous system, which we can get by doing our own practice. A glandular system that is in balance. Because if we are out of balance in our gland secretions, that means the hormones, we are going to be in an emotional mess. And then emotions and mind are disturbed, then that our practice is going to be very difficult to hold steady, to actually follow the process of awakening the Kundalini. So those are very immediate necessary steps to be ready for that. But the actual raising of the Kundalini is not particularly hard. In fact, there are some techniques that one can do, and in a weekend you could raise it. But that would be forcing the Kundalini to wake up. That would not be preparing the body so that the Kundalini awakens when we are ready for it to be awake. Forcing the body, you could do these practices, you can learn them, there is some workshops on that, you can do some practice and then in a weekend get the Kundalini up. But is this sensible? Is this wise? Even though it's not passive, because you are doing it, still, are we ready for that? Kundalini is a very powerful energy and it's like a cobra. Do you want to go into the bush and hit the bush with a stick until the cobra comes out? Because the cobra may come out. And are you ready for that? Are you ready to tame the cobra? I'm not sure you are, just by forcing it to come out in that way. Or can we play the sweet melodious music and the cobra will hear it and will want to come out naturally? So this is the metaphor that there are some practices that we can do to get ready. And when we are ready, Kundalini is going to want to wake up. And as far as I have seen in my practice of Kundalini Yoga as taught by Yogi Bhajan, I haven't seen anyone having an awakening of the Kundalini in the wrong way, in like an spontaneous way, going through the wrong nadi or having some strange manifestation. In anyone who wasn't already having some sort of mental illness or anything like that, anyone who was healthy and they started practicing Kundalini Yoga, I always seen a very slow and gradual development of the consciousness. There can be a big jump in some practice someday and having a special awakening and having some taste of cosmic consciousness. But very often in the gradual awakening, in the gradual getting your body ready and your mind ready and working on yourself, there doesn't have to be like these incredible visions and awakenings that you can feel one with the universe. It can be something very gradual and slow, and you may not even noticing that the Kundalini is awakening because everything is happening slowly, and every day you feel better, more conscious, more aware, more awake, your body more healthy, you are more potent yourself, more creative, and you don't realize that slowly the Kundalini is coming up. So I would say that's more preferable than having a special experience that you see something incredible and then you fall from that experience and you encounter a challenge on how to deal with the aftermath of that. Having said this, what is the actual path of the Kundalini? So let me do a drawing for that. I think it will be helpful, even though on the last video that I did, that you saw, if you watched part 1, I already implied by the very name of Kundalini Shakti that there is a shell and it has to break, the Kundalini has to rise, and it goes to the crown. We already explored this, but let me just do it in the physical body so that we have something related to the body as the way it goes. So let me draw a yogi and yogini. As usual, I make them very thin sometimes, but never mind, that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect drawing. So, all right. Now, first of all, yes, there is a middle path, there is a central line that is going to cross through the whole body. That's the Sushumna. I already talked about Sushumna in the other video. I think I wrote Shushumna in the other one, but it doesn't matter. It's Sushumna. That's the central channel. But then we have two other channels. I was referring to these ones when I was talking about the symbol of the dollar sign, like the two snakes, and only having one of them. Now, in some drawings, you will see them like going back and forth, twisting up, like in the Caduceus drawing, right? Passing through every one of the chakras in the body. And that's a valid way of drawing it. There's another way which is just on the side. Let me just do let me draw the first chakra like this. Very big because it's relevant. But then the others, let me do second and third. Small points, but you know that it's just to mark where the chakras are. Sixth and the seventh is outside of the body, a few centimeters out. And so, as I said, the Ida and Pingala, the two energies of yin and yang in the body, sometimes they make them crossing through the chakras, so they would be like this, kind of like that, going like that. But sometimes you can see them also just going through the sides like that. The hot and the cold. So this is the left side of the body in this yogi that we are seeing from the front. That would be the cold. That would be yin, yeah? Yin. And female, Ida. And this would be the yang, the heat. They merge in the third eye. The third eye is a lotus flower with two petals. Has only two petals. One for the yin, one for the yang. So, in the steps involved in the awakening of the Kundalini, the very first thing is we have to be aware that we are generally either on yin or yang. We are generally with a predominant energy in the Ida or the Pingala. And we can notice this through the nostril that is breathing predominantly. So, at any time we check the breath, we'll notice that we are breathing more from the left nostril or the right nostril, and that is indicative of the energy being on one side of the body. So in order to notice this requires a certain sensitivity, a certain awareness, and generally a practice of pranayama is going to give you that, and meditation is going to give you that awareness, and pranayama particularly to notice which of the channels are active, through which of the nostrils are more active. So the first step is being aware of this. Am I more yin or yang at this moment? Now, the next step, that would be, should I put the numbers? Maybe. Okay. So the first one would be awareness of which is more predominant right now. Would it be Ida or Pingala? Pingala or Pingala? I don't know. The second step would be balancing both. Balance of these two. Yeah. And when you balance both, and we will see some practices to do that, and when Ida and Pingala get balanced, what happens is that Sushumna awakens. So there's an activation of Sushumna. And there's going to be a number of things that are going to help this activation of Sushumna. And we will read in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika where it explains the kind of practices that we can do to do this. But, if we need a certain sensitivity for the awareness of Ida and Pingala, let me write here what we need, okay? So we need some sensitivity. To balance both, we need the awareness and the will to do it. And the activation of Sushumna requires a certain discipline. And a certain command, yeah, to to do the things that you need to do to activate the Sushumna. We will see more about this when we read the book. The fourth one would be Kundalini awakens. So when these two channels are balanced, within the first chakra, the Muladhara, we have these 4 petals. I'll draw them in red, not because they are young, because the first chakra has the energy of color red. And here is where we have the little Kundalini, which initially is asleep, and we want to wake this up. And that's the step 4th. And what do we need? What do we need for this waking up? We need to be ready. Strong nervous system, balanced glandular system, so on and so forth. 5th step. The Kundalini is going to rise and is going to go through the chakras, going up the pink channel. Go through the chakras. Well, what does it need to go through the chakras? Well, every chakra has some challenge. The chakras are like switches of different aspects of our brain, different aspects of our personality, different emotions, different... there's a number of characteristics that are related to every one of these chakras. And one chakra may be out of balance, it may be filled with toxic energy, it may be closed. So in order for the Kundalini to go through all these chakras cleanly and easily and softly without any kind of challenge, all these chakras need to be open, clean, and balanced. Right? Hopefully you can see there. Otherwise, what can happen is if you raise the Kundalini and it goes up from the first chakra, and at the beginning there is this immense power that is waking up, and second chakra is passion. It can be sexual energy, which is a way that you may get distracted if the sexual energy is not balanced. You may get very distracted by that, and then you experience a lot of bliss and joy, but then you go into the sexuality of it, and then the energy goes back down. So you go back to the first chakra. Or you may purify your relationship to the second chakra, and you may gather the passion, and then the Kundalini wakes up, goes 1, 2, gets to the third one. And third one is linked to digestion, and maybe your food is not very good, the food that you eat, your diet is not great, and then the Kundalini gets blocked, and you're going to be experiencing all sorts of troubles with the third chakra. So that can be a very slow process of, slowly, like waves, going up, 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 and then crossing through, getting to the challenges of emotional attachment, your communication. And you see, every chakra will have its own challenges for the Kundalini to reach to the highest one. So let's say that you get to the highest one. You need, the Kundalini has to reach the 7th. Well, the 7th by itself has a particular challenges, because there is a jump here from Idam Pingala where they join to the actual crown, and it requires a certain surrender. Surrender to the cosmic energy. Here is our crown. Here is the crown of Raja Yogis. Let's draw it like that. Yeah. And here, it's Shiva waiting for us, waiting for Shakti. So we need to get here, and here is the point of merging Shakti and Shiva. So this is the merger, yeah. Let me write here steps. And after you merge, this is like the enlightenment state. And it's not always talked about the next step. The way I was taught by my teacher, Shiv Charan Singh, he says, this is enlightenment, but this is not full liberation. Full liberation is after the merger of Shiva and Shakti, you have to descend into the heart. So you have to go up this way, but then down into our spiritual heart. Not the physical one, but the spiritual one. And when you settle into the spiritual heart, then this is where the liberation happens. So here we can see what we need. And for this we need a certain grace. And there has to be also a certain non-attachment to the bliss that you get in the seventh chakra. We will talk more about this when we read the book. But basically, this would be the path, yeah? Rising up and down into the heart and settling into the heart. And there could be a little moment of a little bit of Kundalini rising to the crown, and you have a little moment of enlightenment. What does that mean? Enlightenment is light, and light can simply be seeing the things clearly. So you could be one day doing a meditation and suddenly have a moment of clarity of some particular challenge that you've been having with some strong karma in your family or in yourself. And suddenly you see it clearly. You see where it comes from and you see what you have to do to get rid of that. And that's like a little moment of Samadi. Or it can just be with no images. It can just be a moment of bliss and joy and peace and one with everyone. And you sustain it for a few minutes, a few days. It can stay there and then it can kind of goes away. And the Kundalini may go back to its resting place and it has to go back up again. So sometimes it's called like fleeting Samadhi. My teacher, my mantra teacher, Mas Murray, over there. This is Shiv Charan Singh. This is my spiritual teacher. This is Mas Murray behind the leaf. He said, sometimes when you are chanting mantras strongly and then you hold the breath and you hold the vibration, then there comes a moment of fleeting Samadhi. There is a moment of little Samadhi and then it goes away. So Samadhi is something that may come and go, and there's like a tiny little enlightenment. And I think most people who practice yoga has some sort of experience of that. The challenge is to sustain the state of enlightenment, the state of Samadhi. And then after that, the challenge is to liberate yourself, which is not the same as enlightenment. So, okay, this is the whole path with all the steps. What do we need? I find it interesting that there has to be a certain balance or mastery of a number of things. Like here, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, there is three aspects which are connected to the three gunas. Yin being more tamas, yang being more rajas, and Sushumna being more sattva. So there has to be a certain mastery of the three aspects of the gunas. The 5 chakras have the 5 elements. So there has to be a certain mastery of the 5 elements, yeah? Earth, water, and so on. And then the 7 chakras, a certain mastery of the 7 chakras. And when you finally meet Shakti and Shiva, there is a mastery of the polarity, which is the highest mastery when you cross through the third eye, because the third eye is when yin and yang merge. So beyond the third eye, this is when you go beyond polarity. That means finding unity. That's why we find God in that unity. All right, I hope this was already useful, but don't go away, don't switch off there, don't go to the next video, the next YouTube video. Stay here for a moment because we're going to read a classic text, and I encourage everyone to read classic texts and understand them from our own perspective. The book that we're going to be reading today is Hatha Yoga Pradipika because it explains in more detail what is required and what is happening in this awakening of the Kundalini. I have an itchy beard today. It's in the nose. All right. So Hatha Yoga Pradipika is one of the classic books of yoga, and I recommend to read it. This was written by Svatmarama, And this particular edition is by Swami Digambaraji. The writer Swami Kulvalayananda has this message, but I don't think this is, I think, an edition by Swami Digambaraji. Okay. The director of research of Kaivalya Dhamma, Yoga Mandir Samiti. Okay. All right, so this is the book. I will leave the reference in the description of this video. So if you go to the description of the video, you will, sometimes you have to click the three dots, you will have this book. The book has a number of lessons. This is very similar, the structure, to the Yoga Sutras. The first one, lesson 1, addresses asanas and diet. The second one is Satkarmas, purification and Pranayama. The third one is mainly about Kundalini and Mudras. The fourth is Samadi. The fifth is just some yogic treatments. We will not go into the fifth. So let me, before anything, in the last video, on part 1 of this video on Kundalini, I ended up the video talking about some sort of, I don't think I did any drawing. No, I didn't do any drawing. There was this Chinese myth of Nugua, the goddess of half snake, half woman who creates the humans. And if this myth, she had to repair the pillars of heaven, and she was cutting the legs of a tortoise. And I find it very interesting that in lesson 1.10, it says, yoga is a monastery for those who are afflicted by unlimited suffering. And for those who are engaged in the practice of all kinds of yoga, Hatha Yoga is the supporting tortoise. And it says that, as the myth goes, the Meru mountain, which served as the churning rod when the sea was churned by Devas and Asuras, rested on the back of a tortoise, who was supposed to be an incarnation of Vishnu himself. So you see, even in Hindu tradition, not only China and other ones, there is this idea of a turtle and the world on top of a turtle. It's quite nice. Turtle is also a metaphor that is often used for a number of things in yoga, one of them being the 5 senses, because the tortoise has 1 head, 2 legs, and 4 legs, right? So the practice of pratyahara, for example, is like getting all the limbs inside the shell. And I think it makes sense, because when we want to awaken the Kundalini, in a way, this process of awakening the Kundalini is like the process of meditation. And it's like we have to pull out from the senses and inwards and going down to break the shell. Yeah. So bringing out the senses is like doing pratyahara to do the practice, the dharana to get the meditation, dhyana to get to samadhi. So there is a path of asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The Yoga Sutras 8 steps are reflected in this path of the Kundalini. You have to remember that Hatha Yoga Pradipika is an older book. It's a more recent one. I think it's from the medieval times. So it's like more modern understanding and elaboration on the Yoga Sutras. Very interesting, the turtle there. So as we go into the lesson 2, and it's telling us that if the nadis are full of impurities, we cannot travel along the middle path. How can then we attain Onanii, which is like Samadhi? How can one succeed in one's aim? So this is saying there is impurities. Look, if we are eating meat, for example, or consuming coffee or tobacco or other drugs, there's going to be impurities in the nadis. The nadis have to be clean. Otherwise, the energy is just not going to flow. And Kundalini is just energy, it's prana, so it has to be able to flow through them. So, hence, the pure heart of the yogi should regularly practice pranayama so that the impurities in the Sushumna Nadi are removed. So, the importance of pranayama is again and again and again mentioned many times in this little book. Particularly, what is the pranayama that is going to help clearing the Sushumna Nadi and letting the energy go up? Remember, this is the 3rd step, right? It's second and third. This is the pranayama that Hatha Yoga Pradipika says, actually the first 3 steps to recognize what's happening, balance between Nida and Pingala, and awaken Sushumna, and clean Sushumna. Because Sushumna can also be with impurities. So that pranayama, that's a very common, well-known one that we call Anulama Viloma. Sometimes also similar, not 100% the same, but similar is Nadi Shodhana, which is, Nadi, Shodhana. Shodhana is like cleaning, purifying. So purifying the nadis, makes sense. It just describes, so filling the cavity, so breathing in through the sun, so that's the right nostril, exhaling through Chandra, that's the left nostril, and performing Kumbhaka, which means holding the breath, and then inhaling through the one that we just exhaled, and holding the breath as long as we can do it without suppressing the impulse to exhale, and then exhaling through the other one. Never rapidly. So as you practice Anuloma Viloma or alternate nostril breathing, the breath becomes slower, and the control of the breath implies the control of the mind. That's also mentioned in the book, but that's something that we know already. By controlling the breath between the two channels, and holding the breath. Inhale, hold. Exhale, hold. No, sorry, exhale, inhale, hold. Yeah? Exhale, inhale, hold. Exhale, inhale, hold. And every time we do this, in the holding, there's a possibility for both the energy in Ida and Pingala get balanced, and then it raises through the Kundalini. You may see many stickers here, but don't worry, we will go relatively quick through them. So now the Sushumna is purified enough, and the Ida and Pingala are balanced, and the Sushumna has been stimulated, and now the prana is going to start to go through Sushumna Nadi. By simultaneous contraction of the pubic region, Mula Bandha, and the throat, Jalandhara Bandha, and retracting the abdomen, Uddiyana Bandha, it begins to course through the Brahma Nadi. Brahma Nadi is the Nadi of Brahman. Brahman is God. So that's the Sushumna. That's the channel that goes up to the top. Ida and Pingala don't get to the top, only get to the 6th chakra. So it's talking about Mahabandha, yeah? Mula Bandha, Jalandhara Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha. That's going to be the practice that is going to make the prana go through the Sushumna Nadi. And this is the reason why I did the other video on the bandhas before I did this video on the Kundalini. And if you have been following the channel for a while, you will see that there's a number of videos that are connected, and now they are all in a list. There is 3 caves, and there's 3 locks, there's 3 grantees, and there's 3 keys to open them. Those are the bandhas. And if you practice the bandhas, you're opening the 3 keys to awaken the path of the Kundalini. And it's going to help to awaken the Kundalini. So now we come into the Kundalini. These all different videos that I did throughout the time, they are all connected to understand the whole process of awakening the Kundalini. And now we are ready. Now we are ready to talk about the actual Kundalini rising. So let's go. Raising Apana upwards and taking prana downwards from the throat, the yogi becomes like a boy of 16 and is freed from all the age. All right, so let's stay here for a moment. So let me take another color. Prana is the descending energy going down. This is prana. And apana is an energy that tends to descend. These are the 5 values we have. Samana, Udana in the head, and Vyana all around. In the case of apana, when we practice Mula Bandha, we are closing down and inverting the flow of apana to go up. Which, by the way, this is something that we also do through the sitting posture, particularly when we do Patmasana. When we do lotus pose, our feet are going upwards. So actually, many of the sitting postures are replicating that, but please notice. I'm sitting on a chair for doing these videos because it's useful with the computer, but if you are sitting in Padmasana, the soles of the feet are facing up, and the feet and the first chakra, they are the places where we release apana. So apana is actually being inverted together with the prana, which is descending down into the third chakra. These two meet here, and there is some sort of churning, like the, making milk, making cream or butter with the paddle. We are churning the milk, and this energy descends, and that mixture of prana and apana, that is the mixture that awakens the Kundalini. And now, having cleared the central channel and awakening the Kundalini, we are ready to let it raise. It's all very scientific, all very methodic, and the technique is very clear, step by step, very useful. Now, getting settled in Patmasana, I was just talking about this. The wise should, with the neck and body held erect, close the mouth and effortfully exhale through the nostrils, making a sound so that exhalation is felt in the chest, throat, and upper part of the skull. Then he should breathe in quickly till the inhaled air reaches the cardiac region, the lungs. So there is a number of breaths that are similar to this description. You could understand this as Bastrika. You could understand this as Kapalabhati, even though it's slightly different and softer. And from the tradition which I practice most, which is Kundalini Yoga taught by Yogi Bhajan, this is what we call breath of fire. That's the breath that is similar to this. We do it pretty fast, almost like Kapalabhati. Bastrika can be slower and stronger, but it's perfectly, it corresponds perfectly to this explanation. No? Forcefully exhaling, effortfully, and the inhalation has to raise. And maybe someday we will do a video on the breath of fire. But in any case, this is telling us that when we inhale and exhale in this manner, we are stimulating the Kundalini. We will see. That it awakens the Kundalini soon. It purifies the yogi and proves to be beneficial and removes the impediments like phlegm settled at the mouth of the Brahmanadi. Phlegm, like not literally, but some sort of toxic energy in the mouth of Brahmanadi. Because Kundalini is believed by writers on yoga to be an energy lying dormant in the pelvic region. It can be roused to action by yogic performances. And then a very rich and intense sensation complex is experienced by the yogi, and he perceives something rising up along his back to his head. And he's telling us, farther along we will read the next verses. So this is the point where he talks about Kundalini, and he's telling us, look, this is the breath of fire with the practice of the Mohabandha, particularly having balanced the energies, having cleared the nadis. This is what's going to awaken the Kundalini. Good, the ingredients are coming together. Now let's go into lesson 3. Lesson 3 is the one that speaks mostly about the Kundalini. It says, just as the Lord of the Serpents in the support of the earth with its mountains and forests, the Kundalini verily, well, Kundali in this case, is the support of all the practices of yoga. The meaning of Kundali being the support of all the yogic practices is obviously that all the yogic practices are aimed at awakening this dormant power in the man. Now, it says yoga has created, the technology of yoga has been designed to have step by step the whole process to awaken the Kundalini to get to this enlightenment state. It doesn't mean that you cannot reach in any other way. We would say that any saint who reached sainthood has awakened their Kundalini. It's only that they didn't pay attention to that. And a saint will speak about the love in their heart and the clarity of their vision, and you will see it in the generosity of their acts. You will see all the virtues that go through associated with the different chakras in that saint. Only a saint that is not familiar with yoga, maybe a Christian or a Muslim saint that is not necessarily familiar with this, they will just be saint. And who knows, maybe they did yoga in another life, I don't know. But they reach to that state and the Kundalini is awakened, even if they don't speak about the Kundalini waking up and the path that it takes. But, their eyes will go towards the heavens and they will describe some of the experiences, and it's similar to what we do in yoga. It's just that in yoga, we have, thanks to all these thousands of years of evolution of yogic teachers who have been exploring and describing very specifically every step of the way on how to get there. It doesn't mean that just because we know the path doesn't mean that we can get there by our own means. Grace needs to come, right? We can do all our own practices, but if there is no grace, there will be no enlightenment in some way. All right? I didn't know this was coming right now, but when by the grace of the teacher, the dormant Kundalini Shakti is roused, you see here, Kundalini Shakti, the way it's written, this is why I was writing in the previous video, Kundalini Shakti like this. So it's a power, and this coiled, Kundal could be like a coil, yeah? Something that is a circle. Is roused to action, and all the lotuses and knots, these are the chakras, and the granthis are pierced by prana. So this is where the other videos that I was talking about, the granthis and the keys to open the granthis, this come in effect. Then Sushumna becomes the highway for prana, and mind becomes objectless, and death is evaded. Sometimes they exaggerate a little bit some of these things, but okay, that's good to know. Now, for this practice, therefore one should with all efforts practice the mudras in order to arouse the goddess Kundali, sleeping in the lower entrance of the Brahma Dwara. Dwara is gate, yeah? So the gate to Brahma, that's Sushumna. And it tells us which are these mudras that is telling us to practice. And it's 10 of them. How interesting that it's 10. I am numerologist, so I like numbers. But look, Mahamudra, Mahabandha, Mahaveda, Kechari, which I have the video on Kechari Mudra, I already talked about that. Uddiyana, Mulabandha, Jalandravandha, Viparitakarani, Vajroli, and Shakti Chalana. Now Vajroli is interesting because in the other video on Mulabandha, I was talking about how in the practice that we do from Kundalini Yoga, as taught by Yogi Bhajan, we contract also the sphincter and the sexual organs, while in Hatha Yoga they separate Mulabandha from Vajroli Mudra. But it doesn't matter if you separate it or not at the end, because as we can see from the book, Vajroli is one of the ingredients to help the arousing of the Kundalini, together with the Mulabandha and the Jalandhara. So all these 10 mudras are part of the process. Kechari is also part of the process. And in that video, I was talking about how there is a modern adaptation of Kechari Mudra with the tongue in the upper palate. And yeah, maybe something else here in the book as well, I think. Let's check. Oh yes, okay, so it comes right now. So in the Kechari Mudra, the tongue is into the nasal cavity. In the adaptation, I was talking about putting the tongue in the upper palate, and I mentioned about Amrit, and I mentioned how Amrit flows down from Bindu, but sometimes it's described like it flows down from Chandra, not from Bindu, but Chandra. Bindu and Chandra are both symbols from the Om, so it's interesting that we find them in the body. The yogis talk about Chandra being in the roof of the upper palate, just the place where I was saying to put the tongue. And curiously enough, when you put the tongue there, not only the point of the tongue, the tip of the tongue points towards the, how's it called? The pituitary gland, thank goodness. Not only that happens, but also we are stimulating that Chandra that now the book talks about. So Chandra is the yogic name for a particular spot on the level of the roof of the mouth, and it is supposed to secrete a liquid which, in this context, Svatmarama has called Shira. Svatmarama is the author of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. This liquid is supposed to be the ambrosia for the yogi and an ample secretion of the juice, and its conservation are regarded as a prerequisite for success in Vajroli. Now this is the Amrit, yeah, and this is how it's being produced. So it's relevant. Let's carry on. I think this passage is also interesting because very often we find that the classic texts of yoga seem to be written by men, for men, and they exclude women. And it seems almost like they don't include women in the yogic practices. But this shows otherwise. This is a very old manuscript. And look, it's talking about if by appropriate practice a woman collects the upper secretions and also conserves the lower ones, combines the two by Vajroli, so the same application of Vajroli, she too is a yogini. So it's telling us, look, the practice of Vajroli, in which we are collecting the sexual energy and we are pulling it upwards, that practice when a woman can do as well. And it's telling, and that's a yogini. So I think it's very nice to find that there is a recognition of the practice of yoga by women as well in these texts, because culturally it would often be they would often be excluded, women, from accessing the teachings, and some particular teachers would open it again to the women, but it's revolutionary ones, like Guru Nanak, and then when we go into yoga, we find the tradition of Yogananda, which with Lahiri Mahasaya and Sri Yuktesvar opening the teachings to women as well. And it's nice to see that even in these older texts, there is also this mention. So I just wanted to point it out. I hope women are happy to see this in the book. Let's carry on. The words Kutilangi, Kundalini, Bhujangi, Bhuja is like snake, Shakti, Ishvari, Kundali and Arandhati are synonyms. So sometimes they use one independently, one or the other, even though they are not 100% the same, they are very, very connected. But you can see, for example, here, Kundalini Shakti, yeah? So they are connecting them in some way. Just as a door is opened with the help of a key, similarly, the yogi should open the way to liberation with the aid of Hatha Yoga practice and Kundalini Yoga. Then Parameshvari Kundalini sleeps obstructing with her mouth the entrance of the path along which one has to go to the spotless abode of Brahman through Brahmaradra. Brahmaradra is like the gateway to Brahma. That's the Sushumna. It's just telling us that in this, when it's asleep, it's like the mouth is almost going down and it's closing the hole to the Sushumna. And when it awakens, it just goes up through it. It says, catching the tail is significant because the process of rousing the Kundalini starts from the lowest part of the lumbar region of Mulabandha. So when you practice Mulabandha, it's like catching the tail of the snake and the snake rising. Let's go on. This is an interesting description. Now we entered into lesson 4. This was all about Kundalini. The lesson 4 I mentioned, it's about Samadi and the relationship between mind and breath and nada and sounds. And this is a nice description. It says, just as salt when dissolved in water becomes one with it, so do Atman and Manas become one. And this union is known as Samadi. Here, Atman is the supreme reality and Manas the individual mind. In the state of Samadi, they unite for the time being. Their union, once for all, is moksha, liberation. The state of equilibrium, in which life activity in general dwindles and mental activity ceases, is known as Samadi. So here we have a description of Samadi. There may or may not there may or may not be liberation. Here, certainly, is uninterrupted bliss. The bliss which results from Laya is obtained from Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga as a state of uninterrupted bliss is the state of Samadhi in which the Chitta remains merged into the one ultimate reality. So reality is Sat, Chit, and Ananda. It's telling us this is reaching Sat, Chit, Ananda. For availing of the siddhis, the yogi has to come out of that state. From this verse and from the verse 430, it seems that Svatmarama, the author of this book, is more concerned of liberation from dukkha than of liberation from transmigration. Now this is a very revealing passage because what it's telling us is that Dukkha is like suffering, Sukh is peace. So dukkha is the opposite of peace, suffering. So it's telling us, look, when you get here, you can get to Ananda. There is a bliss, there is a joy. And if your consciousness, your chit, can merge with this ultimate reality and find the bliss, that is enlightenment. And there is a liberation from suffering at this point, because you are in bliss. But this is not the full liberation of the cycle of transmigration. You don't cross samsara. You want to cross samsara, it doesn't, in the comments it mentions that it doesn't reach to the liberation. This is what Shiv Charan Singh has taught me, that there is, you still have to descend into the heart. To me it makes sense, because the heart is in the middle between the lower triangle and the higher triangle, the animal and the angel. Here is the human, we are humans. So in a way we have to reach the heavens and then come down to being humans. And then is within here the heart that pure love is expressed, and that love totally burns away the rest of karmas and samskaras, and therefore you are liberated. Now, in order to come down from here to here, I mentioned the surrender that requires to go to the top, but to go down, not only the grace has to come, but also you have to even let go of your attachment to the joy and the bliss of Ananda. Because it can be like the final last trap in the path. Yeah, there is a number of cities and other things that obstruct on the way. The Yoga Sutras talk about that. But there is another one, which is this bliss, this joy, this Ananda. That's an obstacle also to the final liberation. But that is the liberation. So it is in us. It wants to wake up. It's awaiting for us to get strong enough and to do the right things to get it awakened. Is it dangerous? Well, if you do it in the right way, in the right step by step, in the right process, following with devotion and with respect, it's dangerous because you wake up, and it's dangerous to the way this world is created. The Maya has created a display in which some people are trying to move the strings in the world and control the population, and they want us to be sheep. And when you wake up, you are not a sheep anymore. And then you are more difficult to be controlled. You are awake and aware, and you see all the games. And that's dangerous, but not to us, to maybe some societal structures, rigid structures, which need to fall down in the times that we are living, in the age of Aquarius, in this Kali Yuga, in the age of darkness, right? So, the age of darkness, Shakti living in the dark, let's raise it to the light, let's find the light, and let's merge with the one, and then get liberated. I hope you enjoyed the steps and the explanation. You know the practices now, you know which information, how to get there. If you want, you can read the books and then find your own path to get there. And a very common, easy, soft, gradual path I found through Kundalini Yoga. To me, it makes sense, but you may find a different one. Just be respectful, be mindful, be respectful of the cobra that is in you, and find a teacher, please. Do it through a teacher. Don't just go by yourself doing these practices. That is all from me. This is all. I put a lot of effort in these videos. I hope you noticed. I hope you realize how much I do. I appreciate if you can just, let's do it like this. Inhale deep. Hold the breath. Press the like button. And then exhale and relax. Like my little final meditation for you. All right, jokes aside, if you haven't subscribed and you want more videos from this channel, then subscribe and click the notification bell so that you don't miss these videos, especially if it's not the first or the second one watching me, then I recommend that you do that. And thank you very much. Until next time, Satnam.